Story 1. The chilled air of the Sterling building always seemed to cling heavier after midnight. My footsteps echoed, stark and lonely, on the polished marble of the empty lobby. Another late night, another deadline conquered, another grim march towards the unreliable metal box I knew as the elevator. The thought of taking the stairs from the 23rd floor was a fleeting, masochistic joke. My legs were already screaming for mercy. The elevator, an ancient relic of brushed brass and dark wood paneling, looked even more imposing in the muted emergency lighting. Its indicator light, a sickly orange, flickered vaguely around the number 7. I pressed the call button. The mechanism groaned, a deep metallic sigh that seemed to resonate in the very foundations of the building. With a final drawn-out grind, the doors parted, revealing a dimly lit interior. 2 of the 3 fluorescent tubes were dead, casting the small cubicle in a jaundiced half-light. The air inside felt thick, stagnant, carrying a faint, cloying sweetness I couldn't quite place, like old flowers left to rot in a forgotten vase. I stepped in, pressing G. The doors hissed shut, a tad too quickly, and the ascent began with an unsettling lurch. For a few floors, it was the usual rhythmic shudder and whine. Then, between the 18th and 17th floors, the car shuddered violently, as if a giant hand had seized it and given it a good shake. The remaining fluorescent tube flickered out, plunging me into near-total darkness, save for the emergency light, a weak red glow above the door. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Just a power blip," I muttered, trying to steady my breath. But the silence that followed was too profound. The usual hum of the motor, the gentle swaying, all gone. We were stopped, trapped. My hand shot out, slapping the door open button, then alarm. Nothing. Only the red glow and the oppressive darkness. Then, a sound. A soft, wet thump from the roof of the car. It wasn't loud, but it sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. It sounded like something heavy, fleshy, settling above me. My eyes darted to the dark corners, but there was nothing to see. Only my own terrified reflection in the polished brass, distorted and gaunt. A whisper, barely audible, seemed to drift down from the ceiling vents. It was not a language I knew, nor did it sound human. It was thin, reedy, like dried leaves rustling, yet utterly chilling. It seemed to coil around me, caressing my ears, promising something I didn't want to comprehend. I pressed myself against the back wall, suddenly acutely aware of the metallic coffin I was in. Then, the elevator dropped. Not a full free fall, but a sickening lurch downwards, perhaps half a floor. My stomach catapulted into my throat. The emergency light flickered crazily, illuminating the grime in the corners, the scratches on the wood panels. And for a split second, I thought I saw something else. A flicker of movement at the bottom of the door crack, something pale and thin, like an insect's leg, before it vanished back into the unseen void of the shaft. The sweet, cloying smell intensified, now mingled with something else, something metallic, like old blood. My breath hitched. This wasn't a mechanical failure. This was deliberate. The elevator jolted again, this time upwards. It ascended erratically, skipping floors, stopping for a terrifying moment at each. The whisper now a low, continuous drone that seemed to vibrate in my bones. At the 8th floor, the doors hissed open, revealing only a solid brick wall inches away. It was as if the car had stopped halfway between floors. The gap was just wide enough for the whispering to flow in, and for the cloying stench to assault me fully. And for a brief, horrifying instant, I saw it again. A pale, segmented limb, retracting quickly into the dark abyss beyond the door. The doors slammed shut, rattling the whole car. The whispering escalated, now joined by a wet clicking sound from the ceiling. A drop of something cold and viscous landed on my forehead. I raised a trembling hand, wiping it away. It felt oily, and under the faint red light, it gleamed with an unsettling dark sheen. The elevator continued its torturous journey, upward, then downward, then upward again, each stop more random, each whisper more insistent. My mind screamed for release. I hammered on the doors, the buttons, anything. my voice hoarse from yelling. Finally, with a gut-wrenching whine and a final shuddering lurch, the car came to a stop. The red emergency light pulsed erratically. The doors groaned, then slowly, hesitantly, began to open. I braced myself, my eyes wide with terror. This wasn't G. This was the subterranean maintenance level, a place I barely knew existed. The corridor beyond was an inky maw, darker than the elevator itself, illuminated only by a single sickly yellow bulb hanging far down the hall, casting long, writhing shadows. And standing in the threshold, half obscured by the darkness, was a figure. It was tall, impossibly thin, its limbs impossibly long. It was bent, as if perpetually hunched, and its head, if it had one, was lost in the shadows where the corridor met the ceiling. It didn't move, but the air around it shimmered with the foul, sweet smell, and from its direction came the wet clicking and the reedy, ancient whisper. My breath caught, my vision blurred with the sheer, unadulterated terror. On instinct, pure primal instinct, I scrambled backwards, pressing myself into the furthest corner of the elevator car. The doors, as if sensing my fear, began to creep shut. The last thing I saw before the sliver of darkness consumed the figure was its hand. Long, multi-jointed, tipped with something that glinted wickedly, reaching out, slowly, deliberately, for the closing gap. The doors finally clicked shut, plunging me back into relative safety within the car. But the whisper echoed in my ears. The foul scent clung to my clothes, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would never, ever, take an elevator again. The stairs, no matter how many flights, suddenly seemed like a staircase to heaven. Story 2. It was past midnight when I finally left my cubicle on the 12th floor of the old Blackwood building. The fluorescent lights hummed a dying song, and the silence of the empty offices pressed in on me like a physical weight. My shoulders ached, my eyes burned, and all I craved was the soft embrace of my bed. The thought of climbing down 12 flights of stairs felt like a betrayal of my exhausted body. Besides, I told myself, the elevator had always been a little temperamental, but never truly dangerous. I tapped the down button. The aged brass plate felt cold under my finger. After a moment, I heard the distant groaning whine of the ancient gears, followed by a metallic shudder that reverberated through the very foundations of the building. The indicator light above flickered, then settled on 12. The doors, a heavy polished bronze, hissed open with a sigh that sounded suspiciously like a whisper. Stepping inside, the air was immediately colder, stale, and strangely metallic. Not the iron tang of blood, but something deeper, older, like forgotten machinery given breath. The single sickly yellow bulb in the ceiling cast long, dancing shadows that made the polished walls of the car feel less like metal and more like a distorted mirror. I pressed G for ground. The doors closed, not with their usual deliberate clang, but with a soft, almost furtive click. The descent began, a slow, juddering affair that was typical for this particular relic. We passed 11, then 10. The numbers above the door glowed an angry red. But then, at the 9th floor, instead of moving on, the lift shuddered violently, then stopped. The dim light flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging me into absolute darkness. My heart gave a jolt. "Great," I muttered, fumbling for my phone. The screen's pale luminescence was a weak shield against the oppressive black. I hit the door open button, then the alarm. Nothing. The lift remained silent, still, and dark. A cold dread began to coil in my stomach. Just a power surge, I reasoned, trying to calm myself. These things happen in old buildings. Then, from somewhere above, I heard it. A faint, wet thump, followed by another, and another. Like something heavy, almost gelatinous, was being dropped onto the roof of the car. My breath hitched. It wasn't a regular sound. It had a sickening, organic quality to it. The smell of old iron intensified, now mixed with something acrid, almost like ozone. Suddenly, the light flickered back on. Not the sickly yellow, but a blinding stark white that bleached the walls, and my own reflection into something cadaverous. The number display above wasn't 9. It read -3. There was no -3 floor in the Blackwood building. My eyes darted around the confined space. In my reflection, distorted by the polished brass, I thought I saw something behind me. A deeper shadow, a skeletal outline. I spun around, but the car was empty. Only my panicked face stared back from the metallic surface. The elevator dropped. Not a smooth descent, but a sickening lurch, like a stone in a well. My stomach flew into my throat. The lights flickered again, cycling through red, green, blue, then back to the stark white. Each color intensified the feeling of being trapped in a carnival of horrors. The wet thumping above me grew louder, more insistent, now accompanied by a low, guttural moan that seemed to vibrate through the very floor beneath my feet. It was close. Too close. The lift stopped again with a violent jerk that sent me sprawling against the back wall. The impact knocked the wind out of me. The doors hissed open, but it wasn't a floor. It was a gaping maw of darkness, not the familiar gloom of an unlit hallway, but an absolute, consuming void that seemed to swallow the light from inside the car. The metallic smell was overwhelming now, almost suffocating, and the cold was bone deep. From the darkness, I heard whispers, like dry leaves skittering across cracked pavement, forming words I couldn't quite grasp, but whose intent felt purely malevolent. "No," I croaked, scrambling to my feet. I hammered the door close button. It didn't respond. The doors remained wide open, inviting me into the abyss. I could feel a cold breath on my face, smell something putrid and ancient. A shadow, impossibly deep, seemed to stretch from the void towards me, a tendril of pure darkness reaching. "Get out!" I screamed, my voice raw, a pathetic whimper against the omnipresent dread. I struck the emergency stop, then the alarm again, then every floor button I could reach. The doors eventually, mercifully, began to glide shut. As they did, in the sliver of space before they clamped completely, I saw it. 2 pinpricks of crimson light, burning deep within the endless dark, watching me. And then, the briefest, most horrifying glimpse of a gaunt, elongated face, barely discernible, yet undeniably there, pressed against the closing gap. Its mouth, a wide, lipless slash, seemed to be smiling. The doors slammed shut with a finality that echoed through my soul. The lift shot upwards, accelerating at an impossible speed, rattling and groaning as if tearing itself apart. I crumpled to the floor, my hands over my head, sobbing, utterly broken. We rocketed past floors that blurred into an indistinguishable smear. Then, with an abrupt, teeth-jarring halt, the lift stopped. The doors slid open. This time, it was the ground floor. The familiar, if slightly dingy lobby of the Blackwood building. The fluorescent lights hummed normally. The air was merely stale, not frigid or foul. Everything was as it should be. But I wasn't. My clothes were damp with sweat, my teeth chattered, and my limbs trembled uncontrollably. I stumbled out of the elevator, not daring to look back at the polished brass tomb, and practically crawled through the lobby and out into the cool night air. The silence of the deserted street was a balm, but the image of that face, those red pinprick eyes, was burned into my mind. I walked home that night, the 12 blocks feeling like 12 miles, my legs screaming in protest. And every night since, I've taken the stairs, no matter how many flights, no matter how late. Because some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. And some rides, once taken, never truly end.